I just recently had a case where I found out that I hired a worker to do landscaping, had no idea the owner was a porn star. And this is, no, I'm not, no, I never even met her, didn't even know about it.
Well, that's a classic porn, the landscaper, knock, knock,
the
knock.
filmer, the porn, she was a porn star and everything else.
Yes.
I was like,
I can see where a porn star would be a landscaper. Yeah. All right, guys, we have something very, very interesting today. I find it fascinating. I think everybody finds it fascinating. We're going to talk about jury selection, body language, what you look for in a juror, what you look for in a person, if they're deceptive, if they're not being deceptive, what you're examining and what you're looking at to figure those things out. And I have an amazing guest today. And I'm going to throw it over to her to introduce herself, tell a little bit about what she does.
Hi, my name is Susan Constantine. I'm a trial consultant, but also I specialize in detecting deception and behavioral analysis.
So here we are. We have a lot of things to discuss, a lot of cases that we're going to go over, a lot of background that we're going to talk about. So I guess let's start with, how did you get into the field? And how did you start?
How did I start? Well, I have to tell you, and I'm going to talk about this actually in my book, and I didn't share this on my ride over, is that when I was 15 years old, I actually was a witness in a murder case. So I think that kind of started my trajectory. I was able to identify who the person was. He was then tried and convicted after I testified, and I think that was kind of the precursor into what I was doing later on. But when I really started to take it more seriously was when I was doing witness prep. So this is prior to going to college and getting my master's degree in psychology. Prior to that, I was an image consultant, and I thought, well, how cool would it be to be able to wardrobe and coach defendants for trial?
And I always find this fascinating, right? And the first time that I remember hearing about it, about like how someone should dress, what they should wear, I remember it was the Menendez trial, right? And if we remember the Menendez brothers, they've been in the news lately because they're trying to get out now. And I remember at the time there was a discussion about how they were dressed, right? If they should wear like baby blue sweaters, and should they look like kids or should they look like adults? Should they wear suits? And I remember at the time there was no social media. It was just news. And people were commenting on what they were wearing and discussing whether or not that would affect how a jury would, think about them and things of that nature. And I always tell my audience, I always tell my clients, what you wear to court makes a difference. The respect level that's given, and it also makes statements. And sometimes those statements are read by the jury. So tell me your take on like the Menendez brothers or O.J. Simpson. I think that was another big one where they were like, he was wearing a white shirt, a black tie, and people were saying, boy, he looks very like, almost like a priest, where he was wearing, white shirts, crisp white shirts, black suits. Tell me what the impression juries get from what you wear at trial.
Well, first of all, let's talk about just the jury pool in itself. The overall community, our entire universe, everyone is primarily visual, right? So it's the visual optics when we're looking at someone. How are we perceiving them? The way they dress, maybe the way they wear their tie, or a woman, their makeup, or the way they style their hair. All of that sends messages, and all those are nonverbal. So people are judging and making assumptions about you just based on your appearance. So that's why I really paid a lot of attention to it, because I knew how powerful that was. For example, when you're looking at the Menendez brothers, right? They were in those nice little sweater shirts and a little collar. They looked like they were out there playing tennis, right? So, was that the wrong choice for them? And I think that goes back to, we need to do a little bit more research, maybe be showing them in different appearances in a pretrial kind of intelligence, and seeing, are people going to, or jurors going to like this look better than that look? Maybe it's the color. So I always take into consideration color psychology. I never put any of my clients in any sort of dark colors, ever.
Oh, that's interesting. So tell me about the color psychology, because that I never even heard, like, and I've been doing this a long time, right? And I generally don't put my clients in dark colors just because I don't find that to be a winning strategy, because you think of like the John Wicks of the world. Like, you know, when you look at John Wick, right, he's all black suit, black tie, black shirt, black suit.
Right. And
you think that's the bad guy. And so I've always had the opinion, even when I have co-counsel, I've always had the opinion of, you know, blue suits. I don't like super tan suits. I like gray suits and blue suits and colorful ties, white shirts or blue shirts.
Right.
So I always dress my clients the same way, and I find that to be a winning strategy just because of my experience over the 28 years. Now, I never thought about, oh, there's a psyche to it. So tell me about the psyche.
So when you look at color, you look at blue. I'm wearing blue. This is actually what we call a trust color, but it's also a pop-up color. I'm on television, right? And I'm in a podcast with you, so I want something that's going to show up a little bit more. But this would not be something that would be appropriate for a defendant, right? Because it has too much color. It's a little too flashy. Dark colors, power, control, dominance. You know, I worked on a case that was in down here, I think it was in Miami, where the client that I was doing the jury selection for was accused of murdering with a knife, and it was a very bludgeon thing. And then, of course, he hatchet. It was a drug deal gone bad. It was horrible. But anyway, what did the attorney put him in? A black suit, white shirt, red tie. I was like, oh no, this is not happening.
Right.
We've got to take this, you know, we don't want him in power control. And then we got the color of blood. Why would you do that?
Right.
So when you think about color psychology, we want to choose those colors that are in those soft blue colors, right? For women like Laura Steimer, who was just unfortunately convicted, there was just so much evidence to prove that she was guilty, but it was the burn and gas set him on fire and then ran him over, that allegedly the jury found that he was guilty. But the point
not allegedly anymore.
Not anymore, not allegedly.
Right.
But they originally put her in a black sweater. Right. And then her hair was a mess, and she had this black band. And my friend from Purdue, she runs up the Innocence Project. She says, "Oh my God, I just think she looks terrible." I says, "Oh my God, you've got to fix her, Nikki."
Yeah.
And she says, "Well, I'll fly you out." I said, "No, I can do it all over the Zoom." So what I did is I removed all the dark colors and put her in pastels.
Right.
Softer fabrics, because it's not just the color, it's the fabric.
That's the Menendez brothers theory, right? It's like same thing, like pastel colors, and whether or not that affects how a jury looks at an individual. It's really funny because I just got out of a trial a couple months ago where one of the jurors, after the second or third day, sent back a note to the judge and said, which one at the table is the defendant? Because we were all wearing very similar suits. I don't like wearing red ties at trial. I don't like my client in red ties at trial. Depending on the accusations, this was a murder case, so obviously same thing that you were thinking. And it's funny because I never think of it as the psyche of colors.
Yeah.
I just think of it as like what's worked for me in the past. And what's interesting is, you know, a lot of lawyers don't behoove themselves of jury selection experts or body language experts or color experts because sometimes their clients don't have the funds to do it. And that's a whole nother kind of, you know, discussion of like access to real justice. Is it, you know, because jury selection experts cost money, body language experts cost money, and all these things that go into a winning strategy. And a lawyer can't do it all, right? A lawyer can't be everything. And we talked about a little bit about this off camera, and we're going to get into jury selection. But when you're picking a jury and you don't have a legal team, you don't have, you know, like I always bring a team with me to trial because I need a paralegal, I need an associate with me, sometimes I bring my law partner, because as I'm asking questions during jury voir dire, and jury voir dire is when we ask jurors questions to find out what their biases are, if they're going to be fair and impartial, you know, what is going on in their head about a case. I can't see what juror 16 is doing because I'm focused on juror number 1. So if I'm asking juror number 1 a question in voir dire about anything, about the case or about, what their biases are, and then juror number 16 is shaking their head yes or no or rolling their eyes. We've had people roll their eyes or crossed. As soon as I ask a question, they cross their arms. And I know just from experience, like, I don't like that person. But sometimes I can't see it.
Right.
That's why it's so important for me, at least, is to have other individuals on my team that are taking notes, passing me notes like, hey, 16 is shaking her head no when you just asked about police and control and if they're good guys or bad guys. 16 is like shaking her head no. So then I can focus on 16. Tell me why it's so important, in your opinion, in terms of that jury selection. Why is that so important to have someone to see those things and to kind of relay it?
Oh my gosh, we could go do a whole show just on this one, right?
That's the idea, but we're not going to go through. We're giving people a taste.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying? Like, this is really a taste of what goes on. This is inside baseball. A lot of podcasts don't kind of discuss what goes on and what goes into, a trial. And people are just like, they're sitting back, they're watching the Karen Reed case, and we'll discuss that, or the Sean Combs case that's coming up, or any of those other cases, and they're kind of just looking at the witnesses and what they're going to say and what the lawyers have filed for motions. This is kind of the nitty gritty of really figuring out what's going to work at trial. So tell me first, what about jury selection?
So it's really important to have a second chair counsel or someone that's trained. So where I spend majority of my time in my career training attorneys. So I want to train attorneys, I want to train their paralegals, I want to train their new students that are coming on board that are considering becoming attorneys, so that they have a team of professionals that are highly trained in knowing what the specific clues, which I tell them what to look for when you are conducting all of your juror questions during voir dire, because it is impossible. It's inattentive blindness. There's no way you can look at juror number 1 and slip away over here to juror number 12. It's impossible. So what I do is I train others to know what to look for, and then they pass the note on to the attorney, or I pass a note on to them. So what I'm looking for is those nonverbal cues, because people can say anything they want to say, right? And we know that it's only 7% of the communication. So oftentimes, and we'll talk about stealth jurors or whatever, they'll tell you what they want you to hear.
I want to definitely get into, and for the audience, stealth jurors are guys or gals that want to get onto your jury for one reason or the other. Either they want to get on because they've heard about the case, it's a popular case, and they want to, see what's going on the case, or they want to get on to make a statement, right? They want to say, oh, this person's not guilty, and we talked a little bit about the Mangione case, which we'll get into. Yeah. But are people going to want to get on that jury to make a statement that they think that Mangione should walk or that Mangione shouldn't walk? So that's what we talk about with stealth jurors, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
No, I think that's a very good point, because that's part of what we're looking for, right? So there's that interest, why are they so excited and their eyes are fixated, they seem to be overly engaged, right? So that's one of the things that I look for. One of the things that I want to bring attention to, which a lot of attorneys don't really pay attention to, which you can look at, is how many times that pen hit the paper. So when a question is asked, how many of them actually put the pen to the paper during the trial, not necessarily during jury selection? Because that's telling me, as I can find a theme. Who do they like, who they don't like, when do they put, and then I'm watching their nonverbals. Do they grimace? Do they have an eyebrow flash? Do they tilt their head? Do they slightly lean back? So most jurors are told, and this is very common, not to show overt expressions. So that's why it's important for another person or persons to be highly trained to know and look for those little micro things, okay? The ones that seem I would say inconspicuous kind of gestures and movements. So that's what's really important, because everything that we're thinking and feeling is going to be exhibited through our nonverbals. And you may not even know that we have over 42 muscles within our face. It's called the facial action coding system.
Unfortunately, I know about them.
You do know. Okay. So, all right, so you're lying to me, right?
See, I wanted to see if you could tell I was lying.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I look at those movements. So are there incongruencies? So is there anything that's telling me different from when they're answered? their response in their micro gestures are different from what their verbal response is. So I'm looking for incongruency, which we call face anomalies.
If I ask a question like, do you have a religious belief that would prevent you from either going guilty or not guilty or things of that nature, and the person says, no, I don't have any kind of religion.
Yeah.
You're looking at their face, not just what they're saying.
Well,
Because you could see some.
Yes, and also keep in mind too, jurors, we don't see them except from the waist on up. We don't see the waist on down, so we don't see them tapping their feet. We don't see them jiggling their feet. But you might see the jiggling of the feet through the movement of the shoulder, because when it's a vibration that goes through the body, you may be able to see it there. So, I mean, every single clue is a clue to something. So I tie that all together in one tight little package because I'm highly trained in more forensic behavioral analysis, and so I can tell you what somebody's thinking just by their movements and tying it to the stimulus, which is the probe or the question that was being asked, and watching the reaction right then. It usually generally simultaneously happens within 7 seconds or less of asking a question. Most people don't do that. They're picking out A plus B equals C, and that is the wrong way to read people, and it's very dangerous to do that. So if you see a microexpression or a contempt or an eye roll of contempt or maybe a lean back or a lean forward or a smirk or a contempt or a shoulder shrug, means nothing. Means absolutely nothing. I want to see you come back and ask another probe question when you see that, and I want to see it if I can see at least 3 different changes or shifts and within that 7 seconds of that probe. That's how you read people. That's how you forensically read people based on research.
Let me ask you this, I was just thinking about it. Do you ever also give information about how the judge is reacting?
Oh, yes.
So like, I find that, so we've seen a lot of these cases, right? And we can talk about the Sean Combs case, which we will, and all these other cases where the judge is giving clues as to how that judge is leaning, what that judge believes or doesn't believe. And there's a lot of motions that we file before a trial, right? And motions in limine to limit the information that the jury is going to be able to hear, or to allow certain things into a trial. And I always find it interesting because I can see right away in the reaction of the judge and the way that they're speaking to me, okay, are they liking this argument, not liking this argument? How's that going to affect me going forward? How do I modify my argument to either bring them back on board, or in the future, I know, and I do a lot of things, like I do place setting, I call them place setting motions, where I know the judge is going to rule against me, but it's to give the court information for a motion I'm going to file 2 weeks later. So I file this motion, like, on Brady evidence. That's evidence that you should have, that the state should give you in terms of things about your client, why maybe they be innocent. Someone said, oh, I saw someone in a red sweater and my client was wearing a blue sweater. So I might file a motion to say, hey, I need more Brady evidence, and just to see what the judge will do on that motion, because I know 2 weeks later I'm filing a motion that I know they kept some Brady evidence away from me. So I file a motion first, hey, do I have all the Brady evidence? And they come on the record and say, yeah, you have it all. We don't have anything else. And then 2 weeks later, I send the motion that, oh, I know that they missed this. And I see what the judge's reaction is. Is he now thinking that state is full of shit now because I just filed this motion?
Yeah.
So tell me about what you do when you see the judge act a certain way, and how's that affect?
And then that's a great question too. So I think it's important to really be able to identify the person's baseline first, the judge's baseline. So when there's not, let's say, the extra tension, or maybe something that she may not necessarily agree with, or let's say that both opponents are arguing a specific part, whatever it is, a ruling or what have you, or motion, and you're trying to determine, I am anyway, trying to determine what is her baseline. So I want to see when that shifts. Okay, so it could be like I've seen with in the Casey Anthony case, where the judge was very frustrated. You would see him purse his lips. Right? It would do that, and I'm like, oh, he didn't like that. He did not like that.
Well, there's a lot of things that that I think that the defense attorneys were doing during that case that he didn't like.
Yeah, he didn't like.
And it was working with the jury, though. That's the thing. Sometimes the judge isn't the one who's going to find you innocent or not, or guilty. The judge is the one who's making decisions on different things. So even My problem is sometimes the jury will look to the judge to see what the judge thinks. If a witness is on the stand, I'm asking questions and the judge rolls his or her eyes or makes a face.
Yeah.
Does the jury now think, oh, maybe this witness is full of it? Because the judge is making those.
You know, it's really fun because when I first started out in my career, I actually sat behind the bench with the judge.
Oh, that's cool.
And I thought that was cool because, and then he would tell, of course, the defendants are coming up, these are just usually small hearings, like, listen, I've got her here, she's my body language expert, she can tell if you're lying.
Right. That was good.
You know, I don't know, he put the fear of the Lord in or something, I don't know what it was. But, you know, I think that it's important to be able to profile your judge prior.
Right.
I'm always a big one about doing pretrial. I want to know how that person normally responds in other cases that I've worked on, and so that I know what their personal baseline is. So when I can see any sort of shifts or changes, that tells me something's different's happening. So what you need to look at is that you don't necessarily have to decode it. You just have to know if there's something that changed. When you see there's change, there's something that changed it. So just keep in mind. So I'm watching the judge, and then the judge is going to give information away too. Could be again where she's leaning forward, or he's leaning backwards, or shifting to one side, or their torso is turned to the opposite direction, or they purse their lips, or they tighten them. You know, tightening the lips just even ever so much. You know, just or a furrow of the eyebrow, or a narrowing of the eyebrow, or a lift of one eyebrow. So there's lots of little cues. So here's the thing: is what happens is that especially when somebody's lying and it's kind of offset from the judge, the facial expressions move within a certain synchrony. So the fibers and the muscles move and they synchronize perfectly when they're felt real emotions. When a person is forcing it, their expressions will become asymmetrical.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see where they'll try to look sad, and then one eyebrow's going to be a little higher, then the other one's going to go in here, and the other one's lifted up here. I'm like, he's such a liar.
Because they're forcing it.
They're forcing it. When you're trying to force an emotion as if it is a true felt emotion, it will not synchronize and be in harmony. So real expressions and real emotions. There is lots of research in how it ebbs and flows on and off the face. There is a certain duration in the apex when it goes up and when it comes down, and the duration of that and the synchrony of that. So that's what I'm trained to do, and that's why. And I have to give you a lot of credit because I'm listening to you. I'm also really analyzing you too at the same time.
That's going to be bad.
No, I think that's great. But I love the fact that you're so expressive when you talk. And I don't know what your background is, but you have these very big personality, and your gesturing is really awesome and big. I love it. And also your face is you show every emotion on your face. I think it would be very hard for you to kind of keep your emotions in check. So you would be easy for me to read, right? Because I know what a face line is.
Good for everyone. I tell the truth all the time.
Did you see?
See my eyebrow went up? Did you notice?
It's got a little bit like this.
Yeah. You got me. So what I'd like to do is, before we get into kind of more intricacies of body language and jury selection, I do want to talk about some cases that everybody is talking about. And I find some of these cases fascinating, right? So when I was a kid, and it's funny that you say how you got involved in what you were doing, how I became interested in the law was I had this little Honda, and I was speeding around through this park, and there was a stop sign that I stopped at, and then you go up a hill and you stop at another stop sign, and I got stopped by a police officer. He said, you were speeding, and he gave me a ticket. He said I was like doing 6 miles over the speed limit. And so, of course, I hit the books, and I'm looking it up, and it says, you got to pace clock someone, you got to follow them for a quarter of a mile. So then I ran back, and I measured between the stop signs, and it wasn't a quarter of a mile. So I put together this whole thing with a placard, and, I'm going in. I'm Johnny Cochran. So I go into court, and, the courtroom was filled because it was a jury that was before my case. It was, he was doing tickets as well. So he took a little break, jury went out, but the courtroom was still full of people. And I walk in with my placard, and I have all my stuff, and the judge says, okay, it's for this ticket, it's like 6 miles over the speed limit. And I go in and I give my presentation, and I am like, I'm thinking I'm killing it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's not a quarter of a mile, I'm cross-examining the cop, like, how long did you do it? The cop is saying, oh, I wasn't really looking at the speedometer, my partner was. And at the end, I'm like, okay, I got this in the bag. The judge is like, okay, I'm gonna find you guilty. And I was like, holy shit, like, how did I just lose that? So after that, I remember I went home, I was like 16, and I was talking to my dad, I'm like, I cannot believe that cop lied. Like, he knows, like, he didn't, pace clock me. My dad's like, you should be an attorney. And I was like, you know what, I think I'm gonna be an attorney. And that's like kind of the path. It's funny how we all get to where we're going to. So the base of that story is everything that goes on that concerns the law interests me. Something comes out, an opinion, someone makes a decision, the Supreme Court makes a decision. I love reading about that, and then I also love watching other lawyers in action, and I tell this to everyone. My nephew is a first year in law school, and when I was in law school, all I would want to do, besides, I would hit the books, but all I really wanted to do was watch people in trial. Jerry Spence and Dershowitz and Ben Brafman and all of these guys back when I was a kid that were just awesome, right? I would read Jerry Spence's books and watch these trials. So when I hear like these new trials coming up, like the Shannon Sharpe case and the Sean Combs case and what their strategies are, I always find it fascinating. Like, I'm not a Monday morning quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but I like to now, give it a little bit of analysis on what's going on. So what I'd like to discuss, the first thing, I think everyone's going to be talking about this because we start jury selection on Sean Combs on May 6th, which is Tuesday. So I guess that's the first thing, right? So we know about Sean Combs' case, what the accusations are, and my personal opinion is that the public opinion shifted when that video came out of Sean Combs getting violent with Cassie, his girlfriend at the time. I think the public opinion prior to that was almost on his side, like kind of like, oh, he's famous and these girls are coming forward 10 years after the fact. This is all a bunch of nothing, and Cassie's probably doesn't like that he's moved on, and everyone kind of felt that way. And then my opinion is that the defense leaked that video because I don't think it came from the state attorney. And when I say the defense, I mean the defense of Cassie. Because I think that the government was looking at her to say, like, hey, how were these girls coming in and out, and these guys? I think public opinion shifted at that point. So the question becomes, obviously, now when you're doing jury selection, knowing what we know, and we don't know everything, but knowing what we know, what kind of juror are we looking for in terms of the Sean Combs case?
Well, it depends on whether it's going to be different for the state versus, right?
Sure.
Defense.
Oh, 100%. So let's talk about the defense first, then we'll move on to the government.
Sure. So if I were working for the defense on this one, just knowing the allegations that are going on, I would want, on the defense side, those that are not those, if I were working for the defense, I want people who are, first of all, able to set aside both of them, set aside their own personal beliefs and what they're saying and really be more of a critical thinker, being a more independent thinker, not being persuaded by other people. I'm also not looking for a majority effect. So I'm not looking forward to having a bunch of jurors that are easy to sway over or one that are all on my side. I really want...
You want that one disruptor at least,
well,
right?
You want
at least...
But not overly strong.
Right.
So because if there's overly strong, then you might even have an issue with what? You're going to have one standout person.
Right.
Because you've got all these other ones that are kind of...
They're going to be a sheep.
Right. So when you're looking at like the let's go with the prosecution, right? So we know what the allegations are. So we already know the video is going to be shown. So any sort of woman or anyone, a family member that's had someone in their family that's ever been abused or sexually assaulted.
That would know the psyche.
The psyche, right? Anyone that has it, that becomes an empath, towards someone that has been violated. Really not good. Now, if I were on the defense side, I'm going to want those hip hoppers, I want those young kids, I want those that are listening to this, following pop culture. Those are the people that are involved in social media.
Guys, gals, do you have a preference? So to me, I like, see, these type of cases, my opinion is on this type of case, is that if the defense, and the defense has been kind of all over the place a little bit, with what they're going to use as a defense, but I think their base defense is essentially going to be different lifestyles, right?
Yeah.
Your lifestyle is not my lifestyle. If you're a Mormon, good for you. If you're, a guy who has 3 wives, good for you. I think their argument is going to be, hey, listen, everybody has their own thing going. This is what he had going on. Put aside the violence. It's, his preference was to have multiple partners or whatever it was. And listen, at the end of the day, he's a John, right? It's almost like a jury nullification to somewhat, because being a John is not legal either, right? And hiring prostitutes and paying them and flying them across state lines, that's not legal. But the question is, to me, can a jury moved beyond that and say, hey, listen, yeah, the guy paid, here's someone taking the stand saying, I was sexually abused or whatever it is, but this person got paid $15,000, flew across the state, got put up at a 5-star hotel. So I
have a hard time thinking that someone is going to be completely unbiased. I think they're all going to come in with their own sort of sets of biases, right? So when you're looking at a jury, we have to go into it and we're thinking that we know that they're going to be biased, right? It's up to your job, right, to change and reframe that away from these particular acts. So when you're looking at conservatives, or you're looking at Christians, or people that are Mormons, right?
That's what
you're not going to want those on your jury, right? Because they have very strong opinions, they're conservatives, and then now looks at those law-abiding citizens, right? And older people in that mid-age, midlife to older are not going to relate to Diddy whatsoever.
Right.
So now the question is women versus men. And I think it really depends on how they're actually going to spin this. So I don't know what their case strategy is, whether they're going to kind of, smooth that part of it over about what he did and maybe that and show the video of where he apologized. It was a one-time thing.
Right.
This is not something, this is also something that just got out of hand, where then you would have people going, well, both sides. Well, I can see where things would become out of hand. But I would be really cautious on either side when you've got these groupie followers.
Right. And I think we can get into like the stealth juror at that, at that cross point. It's very interesting to me in terms of how they're going to present the case and how they're going to kind of win over the jury that's been so inundated with everything that's been going on. And I always say, I can never change someone's core beliefs. Me saying, or the judge saying, I understand that you don't drink and that you think drinkers are bad, but can you put that aside and be fair and impartial? And someone's like, yeah, I could do that. I know that they can't. Because if you are a staunch Christian, or you're a staunch conservative, or you're a staunch, left-winger, whatever you are, that's your core value.
Right.
And somehow, some way, that's sneaking into the case. If you're a teetotaler and it's a DUI case and you don't believe that drinking is good or drinking is godly, me telling you can put that aside and be fair and impartial usually doesn't work. Right? No. A Christian, I can't tell a Christian, don't believe in Jesus. The rule, I'm going to instruct you not to believe in Jesus at the end of this case, and you got to follow the law. That person is not going to follow the law. So the question becomes, it's almost like Diddy's team needs to find jurors that might not follow the law per se, might want to have a little bit of leeway there where they're saying, hey, this guy's looking at like 30 years. I mean, you can't say that to the jury how much time he's looking at, but I'm sure everyone knows that this is a massive amount of time that he's looking at. This guy's looking at 30 years, and what did he do? Like, he likes prostitution, and he does drugs, he's not a good guy. I mean, that's kind of like what the government is painting him as, is like, this guy's a bad guy, right? And he gets prostitutes, he's violent, he talks bad, he does all those things. And it's almost like for the defense, you want to find someone that will accept the flaws here and say, yeah, I understand the flaws, but are we sending someone to prison because he likes prostitutes?
That's why we need those critical thinkers.
Right.
We need those independent thinkers that can look and listen to everything that's being presented and say, you know what, I may not agree with it, but I'm also, even if they were law-abiding, we're saying, you know what, I don't even care if they're law-abiding, but if they say, I'm so law-abiding that I want to make sure that I hear and I make the right decision based on what they're presenting. And if they haven't proven it to me, then I'm not going to sway towards that particular verdict or, you know, guilt or innocence.
Right.
Right. So I think that it's really important in this case. First of all, we already know that they're going to be biased. We already know that the social media is going to be all over the people. If they're not sequestered, right, we're going to have media everywhere. And then there's all of a sudden you've got all this media attention, and you've got worries of the stealth juror because of all of the attention they're getting, and God knows what they're thinking about what they may gain from it for being part of this. But the main thing that I look for is when they answer that question, can they be? I'm listening to that. I almost want it to see, almost like a slight hesitation. Like,
you want that.
I want that. Now, because usually
because they're thinking about it.
Because if they say yes, that's impulsive.
Right.
That's reactive. Now, I want them to think, you know, I can. I could separate my own feelings. So there's that short little, quick little pause, because you want them to listen to what you just said, analyze it, and then give you the answer. And
I'll tell you a funny story that you're dead on point on that. Mm-hmm. So in this murder case we had months and months ago, there was a lawyer who was in the jury pool. Fascinating woman. After I found out who she was, I Googled her and I was looking up the different cases that she had, and very impressive, mm-hmm. you know, like Ivy League education, off the charts smart. And the case that I was involved in was this stabbing case in San Francisco. And she comes forward and she says, hey, listen, I just want to, the judge says, can you be fair and impartial? And she's sitting there thinking about it. And I wasn't sure if she was like on our side, not on our side, because she's like really thinking about if she can be fair and impartial. Yeah. She's like, I think I could be fair and impartial, which never is a warm feeling for either side. Right. And she's like, but let me tell you why.
Good job, I like that, right?
And she says, you know, my brother-in-law was accused of stabbing someone, and I got into the angle of the stab wound. I mean, this lady was off the charts. Like, she had so many different documents in her head that she was going through. She's like, I reviewed every single document. It was total bullshit that my brother-in-law was convicted, and it's now on appeal. And that's the thing. I don't know if you want me on the jury, but I think I can be fair and impartial. And I was like, God, this lady is so great. Of course, the state didn't want her, because this case really, and I'm talking about... But
that was an honest response, though.
Yeah, it was an honest response. Right. And I think what the state wanted in that case is someone that would gloss over. It's like, hey, two guys were on a street, and it's really dark, which it wasn't, but like, and one guy lived and one guy died, and DNA's on the knife. One guy's blood is on the blade, one guy's blood is on the handle, or DNA's on the handle, and that's all we want you to see. Mm-hmm. And just make a decision on that. And they were very strategic in the way that they picked the jury, mm-hmm. where they found, in my opinion, some people that would have just glossed over it, and they're kind of like, you know, okay, listen, two guys were on. And the foreman on that jury, in my opinion, Harvard guy, I wasn't a fan of him to begin with, folded his arms a lot, wore a mask the whole time. This is after COVID, we're talking about September.
Oh, yeah.
Wore a mask the whole time. I was never a fan of his. He turned out to be the foreperson, and I think he beat up a lot of people, and there was a couple people on this jury that they were beating up. There was one interesting juror, mm-hmm. And that was juror number 1 on my jury. And we had a little discussion about this guy. And why I found him fascinating was because he had different t-shirts every day, Star Wars and this t-shirt and that t-shirt. And I was like, I love this guy because he was a real thinker, in my opinion. Yeah. He was a critical thinker about different parts of the case that I liked. Like, after the alleged stabbing, this mysterious white car pulls up, and the alleged victim in this case, his name's Bob Lee. he goes up to the window of this car. We don't see anything that's happening with this car. There's video everywhere. And they don't know anything about the car, the driver. They couldn't find it. They didn't get the license plate, all these different things. And I'm like, who is the last person to see this person alive? No one wants to know about it. Like, it was bothering me. And I think it bothered him as well. And the foreman came in and said, this is what was so interesting. The foreman came in at one point and said, juror number 1 is crazy, essentially. Like, he's a conspiracy theory guy, and he thinks that everything's out to get him, and he's not in his right state of mind. We essentially wanted to throw him off the jury, the foreperson.
Wow.
So of course we said, you can't do that. You got to go back and work with him. And this guy was very frustrated with it because it was 6 or 7 days at this point. They haven't had a discussion, a decision, and it could have been a hung jury. I thought it was going to be a hung.
What would have been in one of the fact that he was wearing the mask too could have already
Correct.
started.
Right away, when he wouldn't take off that mask, and I didn't like the way that he was looking at my defendant. There was a bunch of body cues, in my opinion, that I didn't like. And this put the icing on the cake. I mean, the case was over, but this put the icing on the cake, which I knew the guy was an elitist, and I always look at juries. I never want to have someone that is like an elite, this guy went to Harvard or Columbia or whatever, because the other people sometimes will be like, they'll defer to that guy. Well, he must be smart, right? Went to Harvard. He went to Princeton. I mean, they don't just take anybody, right? Unless your dad donates a building. But besides that, so he's on this jury. Then he comes back, 6 or 7 days later, and he says, "Hey, listen, juror number 1, he's okay. He's a good guy. I'd like to take back what I previously said." And then 15 minutes later, they convict.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Okay. They kept pounding on this guy and pounding on this guy. I felt bad for him. He came out crying and things of that nature. But that's why I find your job so interesting, because I always try, in my opinion, put what you're saying into use. Not that I have a psych degree or master's or anything like that. It's just 28 years of looking at juries, looking at people coming into my office. When I hear someone come into my office and they're telling me the story of what happened, I'm processing it. Not that I'm not on your side, but obviously, if you're not telling me what really happened, how can I provide you a defense? So when you're telling me the story, I start asking questions like I'm a state attorney, right? Yeah. Because I want to get that core truth. So, and I don't care if someone did it, didn't do it. That's not my job. I'm not a judger. I don't judge people, and there's different reasons for doing different things, and good people do bad things, and bad people do good things. That's just the way that it is. But it's important to know when someone's telling you the truth and not telling you the truth. So what I want to talk about is that stealth juror, right? And the most times that I see a juror really wanting to get on a jury panel is in my high-profile cases. Cases that garner a lot of attention. Cases hopefully Shannon Sharpe's case, if it gets to trial, I don't know if it will, but like the Shannon Sharpe case, the Sean Combs case, the Mangione case, which we'll talk about a little bit. So one way you were just discussing is like when they answer really quickly. Yeah. Right? What's another way that you can...
Well, when I'm looking at a stealth juror, I'm also looking at what we call the silent juror.
Right.
That always freaks me out.
Me too. Doesn't want to say anything. They don't want to answer it. Yes, no. They don't want to give you an elaboration of what. No. I agree 1,000%.
Yeah, and they're also, when you're looking at the jury poll, they're the ones that are kind of leaning back just slightly because they're trying to kind of melt into the group. Right. So they don't want the attention. Those type of people.
Scary.
Very scary, because oftentimes, especially in mock trials, I find that those quiet ones, they are probably the most opinionated individuals, right, because they're what I call internal dialoguers. This is the one that is actually talking, and when they're hearing, but they're not actually verbalizing anything. Right. It's all right in here. Right. Then when you start to open up and ask more open-ended questions, trying to get them to open up, the stuff that comes out of their mouth is unbelievable. Right. So I'm always fearful the silent juror. And what happens is oftentimes attorneys go, well, he didn't say anything bad, he didn't say any good, kind of melted in the back, he's good. All right, we have him on the jury. I hate those. I hate them. I hate them. And it's funny because I always go back to my team and I go, did I miss anybody? Did I not ask anybody any questions? They're like, number 6 never said a word. Yeah. Like, you didn't ask, you only asked one question.
they nodded their head yes or no. They haven't elaborated or anything. So I always go back, and this is inside baseball again. I always have my team go online if someone had a ticket or someone was caught speeding. So if it's like number 6, right?
Yeah.
And I find out, okay, they were speeding 2 months ago, and they're fighting the ticket, right? So I'm like, I find that interesting, that someone would sign the back of the ticket and go to court. They have the time to go to court for 2 hours out of the day and say why they're not guilty. So I always go back to that person. And I always ask them a personal question about that. Like, hey, you look like, you got a lead foot? And they're like, no. Oh, you don't have a lead foot? You ever got caught speeding? Oh, yeah, I actually did. I got a ticket. Yeah. He was like, oh, okay. You look like you drive a Toyota. Oh, wow, how did you know that? Because we've already researched them. We already know, I already know what kind of car you drive. I already know, these things. So I'm like, yeah, you look like you drive a Toyota. Yeah, I do drive a Toyota. Oh, a Toyota Turbo. That must be a pretty fast car. Oh, yeah, it's pretty fast. And I just try to get them talking so that I can see, like, is this a person I want, not want? I might not necessarily even ask them about a bias or something. I just want to get them talking.
And this is the investigative interviewing 101. And even though they're jury, what you're doing, you are slightly investigating.
Right.
You're trying to figure out what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what their biases are, their value system, and all of that. So rule number 1 is you want to build rapport, which I think you are excellent at. I can see it. I know you're very successful at what you do because I can tell. Just in your overall demeanor. So
I can tell she's not lying about that.
No, it's true. I mean, you're able to bring them in and also be flexible and be on the fly. And one of the things that attorneys, they have a list of questions they go through.
I hate that.
And they miss all of the opportunities of where they need to hitchhike off from what they said and be more fluid and go with it. Because it's in those moments where the richest of information is going to be found. It's like a treasure hunt. So when you're reading people, you have to kind of bring them in, ask them open questions, and then hitchhike off from that might lead to other questions. And then here's the key. You want to ask a couple I don't want to use accusatory, but just kind of rapport building questions, and then whip one in there to where you're asking a more probe.
Right.
So then now you're seeing a shift. Is there a change in the demeanor, and watch how they respond, because if you're hitting a chord like the ticket thing, right, you might get them a little bit defensive, right? And the other thing is too, those that have multiple tickets is a precursor to criminal behavior. So why, if on the defense, I may want somebody who's had a bunch of tickets.
Yes.
They don't follow the rules.
Right.
They make their own rules.
Right.
The question is that, how far would they go? So that's something I always look at. The other thing is, I think that's really important, which we didn't touch on, is that social media mining. And I know we talked about this.
I love.
Yeah.
And I've always said this too. A couple things about social media, right? Number 1 is the benefit of social media to the police is like off the chain, right? The investigatory way that police handle their cases now, as opposed to in the 90s or even when I started in 96, 97, the way they would develop their case is completely different than now, right? We didn't have Ring cameras, we didn't have phone cameras, we didn't have phone data that we have now in terms of GPS and things of that nature. But social media is just so crazy, and the cases that I have that are developed from social media, the cases that the police have now developed, for trafficking or money laundering or whatever it is, it's increased by, 100-fold, because either people are on social media buying something in cash, showing cash, talking about something, doing something. And we talked a little bit off camera and about social media, which I find fascinating, and mining social media, but we'll talk about that kind of in a separate thing. But like the social media itself, whether or not they're a public or private, in terms of their settings, I find that interesting, right? Because what type of person would say, yeah, welcome into my life? Like me, my social media is public because I use it for my business.
Right.
But like the norm, the average person, the John Doe or the Jane Doe that has their social media open to the public, I think says something about that person.
It does, and it also, too, of course, how they respond and what they respond to in the social media. So I'm analyzing the actual words that they use. You know, how many words do they use? How do they order their words when they're saying it? Are they spontaneous? What are they clicking on? What are they liking? What are they responding to? Now, when we're looking at, on the flip side of that, those that are kind of like not social media people, there's a couple ways of looking at it. One is they're super private. They don't like social media, so that would be good for the Diddy case. We don't want anybody to use social media. But also, too, those types of people also could be someone that actually could be hiding something. Like I just recently had a case, and it's a case with mine where I found out that I hired a worker to do landscaping, had no idea the owner was a porn star. And this is, no, I'm not, no, I never even met her, didn't even know about it.
Well, that's a classic porn, the landscaper, knock, knock, knock.
The filmer, the porn, she was a porn star and everything else.
Yes. I can see where a porn star would be a landscaper. Yeah, or a plumber. Go ahead.
But there was no social media on it. Why? Because after I started going through all the public records, what did I find? All of these judgments, liens, and everything else into an alias name, which I connected the dots through an investigation and found out that's the reason why
they didn't have a social media.
So that's what I'm saying. Is that, oftentimes we just kind of look at the surface, right? It's not on the surface, because everyone's going to give you the best of you when they meet you.
Sure.
Right?
And especially when they're on a jury.
Yeah.
They don't want to say something that is like off the chain, like you could, it's very difficult to find people to admit, racial biases.
Yeah.
If your defendant is black or your defendant is some sort of minority, it's very difficult to try and pull that out of someone other than social media, other than seeing what they like, what they don't like, looking at their social medias, what they've clicked on that they like or they don't like.
Or liked,
It's very difficult to get that out of a person, because there's 30 or 40 people, 60 people sometimes, 80 people sometimes in a room, and what's the person gonna say? Oh, like, I'm looking at him right now and he's got dreadlocks, I think he committed the burglary. Like, they're not going to say that.
Right.
And they're not going to be honest with you. That's why the body language is so important. That's why those answers that get to that point, but those questions that you're asking aren't necessarily that one forward question. You're never going to have a smoking gun with a juror. That they're going to be like, okay, you broke me. I don't like, XYZ because of his color, because of his race.
Get them talking more. I always say this. You get them talking more, at some point they're going to hang themselves. Every single time, unequivocally. I don't even care if they're a sociopath or a psychopath, because when I'm reading people, it's really interesting, because even those that are really good, skilled liars, it's because, like Casey Anthony, for example, she was really good, very linear. She could tell you everything from beginning to end very fluently, right? You can see this all in her interviews. You need to think about questions that are going to throw them off. Something they're unexpected, and then see where that gap occurs. Then you just focus around that. What oftentimes people and especially attorneys, work way too hard, spending their time on not significant issues. They need to focus in and find where there's that shift, or that's when they've asked a question, there was some uncomfortableness.
The divergent.
Then I want you just to focus there. Don't worry about all this other stuff, because it's in there is all the wealth of information. So that's where I feel like I'm really skilled at doing, and has been highly trained in that area, is like find that area. And when I work with attorneys, I can find it in their language. I can find it in the statement. I can tell you when they omitted it, where they left out. I can tell by a timeline, because oftentimes liars or whoever they are will actually tell you the time in the statement when it actually occurred. So when they put a name in, a number, and they say it happened at 7:15, and then I went to my friends at 8:30, and then I got home at 9 o'clock, and then all of a sudden there's a
too
big
much
gap.
exact.
I can tell you when they're thinking fast, when they're thinking slow. I can tell you that what time was actually where it happened. And right before that, there's always going to be some sort of change in their language, of their omitting. There is pause or hesitations. There is abandoning a conversation and they go on to another area. There's all kinds of tactics that they use. So one of the things that I'm really proud proud of? And can I gloat a little bit?
Of course you can
Okay.
gloat. By the way, I love gloating.
I gotta gloat a little bit. So what I teach is the only scientific way to detect deception. I'm using a lot over in the UK, hoping to bring this into United States courts because it's totally objective, not subjective, because they're based on proven deceptive indicators with tons of research to back it up. So our courts are starting to listen to it. I trained 130 West Virginia federal court judges, and 4 of them were Supreme Court justices of West Virginia. Why? Because body language is becoming such a hot topic and people are wanting to know about it. The other problem, the problem
I feel like
is,
my clients should stay out of West Virginia.
stay out of West Virginia because they're highly skilled now. Okay?
They're very skilled in
They're
West
very
Virginia.
skilled, yeah.
So if you're going to commit a crime, stay
Don't
out
do
of
it
West.
there.
Yeah, don't go to West Virginia.
Don't stand in front
All
of
right,
whether
go
stand in
ahead,
front.
yeah.
So anyway, now they know how to read someone very quickly because I teach them how do you do it in 7 seconds or less. There's a quick formula. You just got to know all the tools. Once you know it, boom, you can get it. How to ask the questions. How do you assess the credibility of what person's saying, what they're saying. How do you dissect the words they're saying, and what is the actual meaning behind it? Because people, I got to tell you, we are living in a society of psychopathy. I mean, this is where my passion comes in, right? The psychopathy of, I got to tell you, there's just, the lying on every level is everywhere. I mean, we don't even know who we are today. I mean, there's just really,
Right.
really, you know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
So when we think about
The people that are taking photos on jets that,
Yeah, that's exactly
they don't
right.
own the jet.
They
Yes,
don't
I
even
see
know
it.
the
Yes,
jet.
yes, I
This
see.
is what I would have if I would have kept my job.
Right,
And if I would have
right.
stayed-
The life coaches,
Yeah,
that's a whole nother area of life coaching that somebody's
Right.
a failure and then they become a life coach.
So
But go on.
for example, I had, there's a couple things I want to share with you. I'm going to tell you guys a super trick to do. Do it very quickly, especially in your law firm, is I would say, become a member of Deceptio AI, and I'll send that to you, and you can send it to your
Sure.
clientele. And the reason why that is because if you get a client, like you told me earlier, then I want you to just to tell me, I want you to open up, I want you to tell me everything, and you kind of just pepper them with a few questions to get them to open up, right? Tell them to put it on paper, or if you've got it somewhere videoed or whatever, you can always translate that, and then you can also analyze that too with Deceptio AI. So I tell the potential clients I said, well, tell me what it is, because they, oh, so-and-so, they kind of open up, well, the cops have, altered the video or
Right,
whatever.
right.
I get
Planted
that.
the gun.
I got everybody, or I get somebody calling me from prison telling
Right.
me I've got 200 years, but I'm innocent.
Right,
So I
right,
said,
right.
okay, send me, just tell me in brief what happened and what you want me to help you with. Tell me a little bit about it. So I just open it up, not accusatory. They tell me everything. I take all that information, I scan it, throw it in Deceptio, boom, immediately what it's doing, it's analyzing every single word that they're saying and giving
speech.
me a score
Right.
of the deceptiveness, plus exactly where the deceptive. So that creates my baseline. So then I will send back and say, okay, sometimes if it's really off, I'll send in the report and say, okay, now you're ready to tell me the real story?
Right.
So they don't realize that I'm actually pre-screening them before I actually even consider
Taking a case.
Yes. So I think that's 101, guys, with AI today.
I love the AI angle, and I told you off camera that I was watching a video on Google. Maybe it might have been even a year or so by now, but there was this young man at Harvard that took these AI glasses, and it could have been a Google pair or a Facebook pair. Everybody makes an AI glasses, and he did a facial recognition program into these glasses. I thought it was so fascinating because I'm like, AI is developing so quickly, and I was thinking like, oh, are police going to be wearing these AI glasses and like walking the streets and looking around at people? It's going to say, you have a warrant, you have a warrant. It's like
Yes.
RoboCop.
Right.
So it's like you're coming with me. So one thing that I thought was interesting that I spoke to this young man about. And I really wanted to develop it. Obviously, he wants to graduate Harvard. He's not a Mark Zuckerberg that drops out and becomes a billionaire, which I think this kid probably could do. But that's okay. He wants to get his degree first. But what I thought was interesting about it was the use in jury selection where, you know, not only would it do facial recognition and show me your social media, show me any articles that are written about you, your name, your date of birth, et cetera, but I think it would be fascinating to have and I think that this is where we're going, is to have a facial read in terms of these things that you're talking about, right? So AI always needs to feed off of something. So let's say you're the expert, which I think you're highly qualified to be, and you feed it in your book, or you feed it in your paperwork, or anything about facial expressions. And this AI would, develop a way to now look at all these 40, did you say 42?
42 muscles.
See, I have a great memory.
Good job.
Everyone says I have a great memory. So you use these 42, these 42 muscles and see, is this person telling the truth, not telling the truth? And you'll instantly be able to read those people,
right,
where it becomes less of a, where judges are saying, oh, this is kind of a guessing game, to more, this is a real scientific, it's not an art, it becomes a science.
It becomes a science, and that's where we're going with this right now, because, reading facial expressions in themselves are not absolutes.
Right.
It will tell
It's really an art. It really is an art.
It is an art, but we've come so far that it's,
we're on the cusp of a science.
Oh, well, no, we are in the science. That's what I'm trying to say to you.
Oh, I think that's interesting.
Because the coding system was called SCANS, the 6-channel analysis, and it's called in real time.
Right.
It is a coding system based on behavioral indicators, 27 of them that are proven indicators of deception. And they have to happen.
Oh, that's
clustered.
interesting.
So with that being said, like if you hired me,
right,
or like I get clients that'll hire me to analyze behind the transactions or videos or whatever it is, anything under the moon in a case. And then what I do is I code it. When I say code it, there's actually behavioral indicator coding system. Just like if you were filling out a form at a doctor's office and they give you a code. There is a coding system now where we can absolutely code a specific movement. Doesn't mean anything unless it's combined with others, but we know that particular, like a shoulder shrug, or maybe the asymmetrical eyebrow, all of that mixed with a probe, after asking a probe, mixed with 2 or 3 more indicators within 7 seconds of that probe.
And you can tell.
Boom, we now know that's probably about 97% accurate they're being deceptive, because it's considering language, it's considering all the different types of techniques and tactics that people use when they're speaking, and what's it called, impression management. There's a multitude of them. So what my passion is teaching people and attorneys how to use it effectively, and so that it really will just open up your eyes to so much about reading people, the jury, the judge, the witnesses, cross-examinations, and and I think you would be so good at this, you'd be able to pick them out because you already instinctively know, because you've been in trial so much, you already saw these gestures, and you're very astute. And I think you're highly visual, so I think for you it would be super easy. All this would do is just polish up the diamond.
Right. I just find the whole thing so interesting. Are you working with any police departments? Do you work with police departments? And this is a very important thing. This is why I always tell my clients, shut your face. Like, stop talking, because the more that you talk, the more that you are giving them the cues, the more that you're giving them the language that you use, the more, and you could be saying, hey, I was at the bank at the time that this happened, and it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it, it's your movements that you're saying it, and not every police officer, not every investigator gets it, right? I've seen police investigators get lied to by alleged victims, and I just had a case where I thought the kid was totally full of shit, right? And he said he was kidnapped, and this happened, and that happened. There was one cop on this case. So there was a female cop, there was a male cop, there was a bunch of other cops, and the male cop the female cop was like, yeah, I got the statement, and this is what happened, and I saw it, you know, it looked like he had some bruises here, but I wasn't sure, and all these different things happened. The male cop, within 10 seconds of getting there, he's like, that guy's full of shit. Like, I mean, it was, he saw it right away, but it's like, your job is to take the statement from the victim, write a report, and, you know, if there's a scintilla of evidence, you got to file it the way you're going to file it, and then you hope kind of the court system gets it right. This cop was so dead on it that at one point, you know, the female cop turned off her body-worn cam because he was just like, this guy, there's something wrong here. It doesn't make any sense. The guy, like, they kidnapped him, but then they let him go. He didn't steal their Bitcoin, but then it looks like he did steal their Bitcoin. So, like, the guy was the greatest. And I remember, so I had him at a bond hearing, and he was on the stand, and he wanted to help the state so badly. I could tell by his body language. He wanted to help them, but at the same token, I knew that he knew that this kid was full of shit. This is before I even had the body-worn camera. And I said, didn't you feel there was something off here? And he like sat back and he like looked up and he was like, it wasn't the normal case. And as soon as he said that, I knew that he knew this kid was full of shit. And then I got the body-worn camera, and all through the body-worn camera, he's just like, there's something wrong with the case. This guy's not telling me the truth. And he knew it right away, and he wasn't telling the truth. We ended up getting that case resolved. But it was just fascinating because, like I said, you know, I love the study of body language. I love the study of jury selection because I think it's so undermined, underwhelming for an attorney. A lot of attorneys just want to get to it, right? It's like, I don't care about motions. I don't want to file a motion. I want to get to trial. And I'm like, you win a case, in my opinion, you win a case in your motions and your jury selection.
And your opening statement.
Opening statement and your theme. If you don't have a theme, you have no case. You know, and I always say that, like, where are you going with the case? What is the theme of the case? Is the theme a power struggle? Is the theme, you know, this is a racial thing? What is the theme of the case? If you have no theme, first of all, you can't connect with the jury. You can't get into their heads, and that's why, and we're going to talk about this Karen Reed case in a second because we have a jury questionnaire that I thought was fascinating, but that's why I feel like a lot of guys that go to trial, just because you go to trial doesn't mean you're a trial attorney, and I tell people this. You can go to trial 100 times, doesn't make you a trial attorney. A trial attorney knows the theme, knows when a case is won, knows that you have to file these motions, these place-setting motions, and these other motions to educate the judge so that the judge understands your argument way before you get in front of a jury. But on that same notion, this Karen Reed case that we have, and for people that don't know, Karen Reed is a case in Massachusetts. I'm from Massachusetts, Western Mass, and it's funny because people have a vision of Massachusetts cops, and I think they get it from a lot of movies that were out. There was one movie with Mark Wahlberg and Leonardo DiCaprio, where, you know, one guy's an undercover cop, one guy's a dirty cop, and, you know, they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they got those Boston accents, and people always feel like Boston cops must be on the take, you know, it's like the old school New York cop, you know, like these guys must be on the take, you know, they're all street guys, they feel like street guys the way they talk, you know, and people have the impression, I think, looking at this Karen Reed case, and Karen Reed was a young lady that was dating a police officer in this small town, and the police officer wound up dead out in the snow, and they're trying to figure out did she run him over, did she kill him, is she responsible for his murder, or did something else happen? And there's all these like different crazy facts and issues, cops throwing away their phone and a DEA agent cracking his SIM card so that no one could find it, and, you know,
getting rid of the dog,
the dog, this
redoing
dog,
the house,
redoing the carpet in a basement that, you know, the carpet was done 2 years prior. So all these like little facts that you're like, wow, this is such bullshit. And when we look at that Karen Reed case, it's like social media is so very important in that case to me, and especially when you're picking a jury. And I think her attorney is doing a great job in the cross-examinations, in the theme of the case. And that theme to me is like, these cops are dirty, right? These are dirty cops. You can't rely on what they're saying. This is total bullshit. It doesn't make sense. 2 and 2 do not equal 3.
Right.
It's like, if there's, it's like, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. It's like those genius kind of relationships that you build with a jury, especially in Massachusetts, where I grew up, everybody was skeptical about everything, especially guys from Dorchester, and I was friends with everybody, under the sun, bad guys, good guys. I had a lot of friends in Boston, and the way I look at it is, the jury that they're picking, or that they picked, they're an inquisitive jury. And on a case like this, what do you think about that? Is that what they wanted? In my opinion, it is.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, what I find really interesting about this whole Karen Read case is, we have the dirty cop kind of story, right? All of that conspiracy kind of stuff. And then we have Karen Read, that did she hit him or didn't she hit him, or could I have hit him, and all of that. Remember all of those phrases, right? And they're trying to assimilate all that and process all that information. I think at the end of the day, they're going to go, I think something happened. I don't know who did it.
Right.
But it's dirty on both sides.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, I got to tell you, when I've analyzed this over and over again. I even did over a 5,000 person focus group, kind of like a mock trial kind of thing, in Las Vegas at CrimeCon.
Okay.
And a Karen Read case is what I did.
Okay.
So I did a mock jury trial. And I pulled up specific pieces of evidence.
Who were, before we, I gotta get more, I gotta get more of this. Because you say Las Vegas, it gets me excited.
Okay.
And then, but who were the jurors that you were assimilating?
Okay, so I don't know if you've ever been to CrimeCon, but
I've heard about it.
Anybody and everybody's in true crime has got to go
I've
to
heard all about it. Maybe this is the year I go. But
I think you should go.
Okay.
It's going to be in Denver. But anyway.
No, it's not Las Vegas. I don't know.
Not this year. So anyway, what they did is they pre-selected a panel. And then in this case, we only selected 6, okay? They were randomly chosen.
Okay.
They weren't.
From the people attending?
They were attending.
So do you feel that there's bias right away?
All right, because they know it was bias.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I was interested in.
This was an exercise. Okay.
Got it.
So what I thought was really revealing, though, the split was like 50-50.
Right. And that's what I said. I said this is going to keep getting hung, I feel like, because people are going to have an opinion one way or the other. I feel like this case just keeps getting hung. That's my problem with it. And so it's so perfect that you said that it was 50-50.
It was 50-50.
Because it is 50-50. If you read the media, there's like these people that are like, she's 100% guilty. And then there's these people that are, she is 100% not guilty. Yeah. There is no one that is like, I'm going to look at the evidence and weigh it really fairly. It's like,
it's funny because we have this discussion, my husband and I. He's definitely the critical thinker, the analyzer. He's the one you would love to have on your jury because he's going to say, they didn't prove it.
Right.
It's reasonable doubt. Because he's learning all of my own terminology.
Why is this cop throwing his phone away? If I'm on a jury, and listen, I probably am the most biased of biased people if I was on a jury, and people know that. They never put me on a jury. I get jury selection notices, and they probably dismiss me within 10 seconds when I just appear. But what's so funny is that you look at these, these kind of facts about, if I just heard a police officer threw away their phone or a DEA agent threw away his phone, right from that point on, I am like, this is bullshit. There's something doesn't pass the smell test.
Right.
Because it's like, there is a turning point as soon as that, I've had cases where cops come in, and I remember an amazing case that I had years and years ago, jury trial, where this young man was in his house, it was Christmas Eve, and the kid was very funny. I really liked the defendant. And he was in their house on Christmas Eve, and I'll never forget, they were watching RoboCop, okay? That's how old this story is. But they were watching RoboCop, and it was blasting, right? And the police get a call that there's a disturbance. They show up, rookie cop, experienced cop, show up at the scene, just those two at first. And they say, what's the disturbance, what's going on? And of course, my client is 10 sheets to the wind, and he comes out and says, get off my property. He's like a guy that doesn't like police knocking on doors or anything. Get off my property. So they're like, we're not getting off your property. He's like 20 feet away from them. And then the rookie says, I heard a shotgun rack. And they dive behind the car, they pull their guns, they call for backup, backup's coming, and they grab the kid, they put him on the ground, all these things happen. And they end up arresting him, right? At that point, what are you arresting him for? I have no idea. But then they search the house. And they go in like a SWAT team, in a line. They go in the house, they're clearing doors,
Yeah.
and they find a Glock in a room that's allegedly my client's with a magazine next to it. They collect the Glock, they're gonna do swabs and fingerprints, but they arrest my client saying he's a felon in possession of a firearm. So we get these cops in trial, and deposition I crushed them too, but in trial, and I have the rookie there, and I'm like, you thought it was a shotgun rack, like a Glock isn't a shotgun, right? And he's like, well, I don't know, I don't have that much experience, but I had his full file,
Right.
And I'm like, you were in the Army for 7 years, you got your rifle badge, you got all these different badges, you've been a cop, you don't know what the difference between a Glock and a shotgun rack, like a shotgun rack, right? So right off the bat, I felt like the jury thought they were full of shit, right? And then the fact that RoboCop was on, and then all these other little things come in, but that first cop is where I won the trial.
Wow.
And I feel like in this Karen Reed case, it just keeps piling on about the inconsistencies. That as soon as that DEA agent
just
testified,
creating reasonable doubt
right.
over and over.
And have
over
you
again.
watched? Did you see that DEA agent testify? Because it's amazing.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Oh, he's got this haircut with a line down the center. He looks like something at a central casting of a bad guy, right? So he's got this line cut in the middle of his head, and every time they're asking him questions about his phone, he's like looking down, he's looking to the side, he's looking
right.
up. He is full of shit.
Right.
Now, I don't know why he destroyed his phone. I don't know why he destroyed
Oh, I know
his...
who you're talking about. Yes,
You know what I'm talking about? I mean, you can't miss him. He's got this haircut. It's ridiculous. But he's cracking his SIM card. He's throwing it away on a military base. As soon as he testifies and I see him, if I'm on a jury, I'm saying, okay, something's not right. Now, I don't know what's not right, but I don't know a DEA agent that throws away his phone. If that was a defense,
right.
If that was my client who's standing trial, and they say, oh, by the way, he threw away his phone and he cracked his SIM card, a jury would be like, holy shit, this guy's got something to hide.
Right.
So I always feel like that first witness sets the tone, right? That first bullshit witness sets the tone for the rest of the case, where a jury can say, that guy, there's something not right with this case. And then all of a sudden it's like the tail light, the carpet replacement, the other cop who's lying, and this cop had an affair with this girl, and this one made out with this guy. I mean, there's so much going on that Karen Reed case that I am shocked that the prosecutor's office wasn't like, hey, let's make a deal here.
I don't know why either.
And call it a day, because this is just getting worse.
I mean, I tell you what, if we get another hung jury,
right.
They're going to, why would they use
try
the
it a
state's money
third time?
Again? No way.
And it must be costing the taxpayers millions of dollars per case. And I'm sure that they both have jury selection experts. I guarantee the state does. And they're trying their hardest, but your jury pool is only your jury pool.
Right.
And I'll tell you something, Boston juries, they're a whole nother animal. I've tried cases in Boston. I've had friends on juries in Boston. I have friends from Boston.
They're a little harder core,
yeah,
right?
They're hardcore. One way or the other. They are hardcore, either hardcore.
But they have a lot of, they're empaths too. Though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. So that Karen Reed case is an interesting one, and I think they did a nice job with their jury selection from what I've heard about how the jury is reacting on that case. I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about also, as long as we're on cases, let's talk about this too, is the Mangione case.
Oh, goodness.
Right? It's exciting. The Mangione case, and for those of you that don't know, the Mangione case is I'm forgetting what the CEO's name is. That's how bad this case is. Isn't it hilarious?
Yeah, right.
It's not hilarious because there's somebody dead, but these cases take on a life of its own. So they've done such a good job, the media has done such a good job of downplaying the actual victim in the case, because I can't even, to the life of me, I can't remember the victim's name, sitting here, the CEO's name. And then you have this guy Mangione, that's all you hear about is Mangione.
Yep.
So it becomes the Mangione case.
Right.
Right? It's like, that in itself is a psyche. Like, O.J. Simpson case became the O.J. Simpson case. It didn't become the Ron Brown case, right? My case in San Francisco, it became the Bob Lee case, who was the victim in the case.
Or the Casey Anthony case.
Casey Anthony
George
case.
Zimmerman
Right.
case.
It's interesting what cases the media picks to call it either defendant or the alleged victim. So in that case, everyone calls it the Mangione case, and it's where the CEO of a health insurance agency or a health insurance company,
United Healthcare?
United Healthcare, was killed in New York. And what I find fascinating is people are either saying, "Hey, this guy's a hero," and I always find this dichotomy interesting. So I get a lot of emails, texts, whenever I talk about a case, and people are like, "Hey, you're full of shit on this case, and this guy's innocent, and this guy's guilty." And on that case, I get people saying, "This guy's a hero." And I always say, well, is he a hero because he didn't do it, and he's arrested, and he's just a guy who got arrested, some schmuck that was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and there was a backpack with a gun in it, and who knows what's going on? Or he's a hero because you believe he did it, but you believe that he did it, and I'm a favor of it.
I think it's almost as if it kind of reminds me of the O.J. Simpson case, that they were going to find someone, him innocent just because he was a black man.
Correct.
Right? Because that was all that racial bias.
I get it.
This is different. So,
and that's the thing we were talking about with Mark Furman.
I want somebody to pay.
Right.
And that's what I think this case is all about. So I have to kind of take a little back step, because when this originally came out, I had one of the stations, I can't remember what, because I do a lot of TV hits, but asked me to look at that video.
That was a slow flex right there. She does a lot of TV hits.
I do a lot of
Go
TV.
ahead. That was a very light flex.
Yeah,
Go on.
So anyway, they showed me the video because they didn't know who he was, right? I'm not going to go into profiling first, and then I'm going to switch on over. But there was that one part that showed with his mask down, right? And they're trying to figure out who is this guy? So I'm looking at his body language. I was able to determine his height based on the cars that were on the side of the street. I could see where the doors of the building was, so I could actually measure approximate height he was. His body structure, whether he was how his body was proportioned, long torso, short legged, and also his framing and how he walked, whether he was younger, whether he was older, if he was fit. And then also in the facial expressions, right? He brought his mask down a little bit. I said, this guy's charismatic. I said, he's very liked by people. He's got this charismatic smile. He can connect with people in an instant. And I said, you know what? I said, he's got dark set eyes, furrowed eyebrows. They come to the center. He's got an angular face. That guy's Italian. And it wasn't but 4 hours later, it was at Luigi Mangione. I said, told ya, I knew. And what was he? I said he was 5'9", he was 5'10".
Right.
So you can measure gait, movement, height, shoe size.
Oh, I think that's all coming in.
It's just all coming in, right?
It's all coming in. But the question becomes, does the jury say, I don't give a shit? Does the jury say, I don't really give a shit that it's the same height, the same eyebrows, the same. This guy was a hero to me. This other guy, the CEO who goes to church, has a family, not a bad thing anyone has ever said about him. But the CEO of this United Healthcare, he was in charge of people getting denied insurance, and millions of people died because of him, and all these other things where someone's like, okay, good, so he killed the guy, all right, we're okay with that. But that's where it's going.
And we get a lot of the younger people that want to stand behind a cause. So we get a lot of the younger generation that wants to stand behind something they want to stand behind. I don't care whatever movement it is. They want to get behind it because it makes them feel empowered. It feels good. It feels like they're like doing something.
And you see that, right? It's really the younger generation.
They're getting, he's gorgeous. His hands, he's hot.
Right. Well, he's getting ridiculous amount of letters, like marriage proposals.
Right.
But I feel like that is going to be the tough part of that case, is selecting a jury that, especially with the stealth jurors, right? Yeah. There's going to be so many people that are going to want to get on that case that are desperate to get on that case, and it's like so difficult to get them off. And I always ask, hey, who was excited to be here today? And sometimes you'll get people being truthful and they'll raise their hand. Most of the time they won't. Once in a while you get someone who's excited to be on a jury, they get out of the house. But in that case, like to me, it's probably the older, the 50 to 65 that I'm looking for if I am the government or the state that says like, hey, there is a dead guy here, right? There is someone who got killed, and this is the evidence we have. We caught him with a gun. We caught him with this. We have DNA or fingerprints. This is his height. This was his weight. This is how he looked. This is how he walks normally because we have him on video here. Here's the hotel he went to. Here's him with his face mask down. Now, I'm not saying it's an impossible case to beat because I think they have a lot of good things going for them, and the number one good thing they have going for them is the public opinion. And when we talk about social mining and social media, and it's like, it almost feels like 90% of the social media, 90% of people's comments are that this guy's innocent or that it's good for him. And it's like, that's going to be the tough part of that case.
Yeah, I think the insurance part of it is going to be a big one though too. I think that's going to play into it. And if you look at the questions that are already being considered on the juror questionnaire has a lot to do with healthcare, right? I'm looking at how many people out there that have been denied insurance. How many of them are older, right?
Or got screwed. Not just screwed with health insurance. How about home insurance? Especially in Florida, right? We have all these hurricanes, and then you pay $50,000 a year in insurance,
FEMA.
and you get your roof gets blown off, and they're like, yeah, we could probably patch it for 10. And it's like, so like, I always feel when it comes to insurance companies, everyone feels like they get screwed by insurance. It feels like, and this is just me talking, I mean, like if I was on the jury, I really would put that aside. But that being said, I feel like every single person in America has gotten screwed by insurance one way or the other. Either they paid too little, you paid too much, they don't do enough coverage, something of that nature. And I think that's what's hurtful for the state in that case.
I think it is too. And I think that when it comes down to it, we need a juror, again, that are independent thinkers, that are critical thinkers, look at the evidence of the case and state that even though I got screwed by insurance, that I've had my insurance premiums have gone sky high, it still didn't give them the right to kill someone.
Right. That's the juror that you want. But that's the difficulty part.
It is very difficult, and all you're going to be able to do is to be able to open up the dialogue, having those, and one of the things you're talking about is being very crafty and asking questions that are not necessarily direct questions, but also questions that tie into values and perspective and views and religious beliefs and moral beliefs, and all of that are going to give you a shaping of what type of juror that person is, because that'll give you insight of how that person may vote in the long run.
So, before we leave, we do want to go over a jury questionnaire. Now, what is a jury questionnaire? A jury questionnaire is essentially questions that the state and the defense kind of agree on. There's a lot of standard ones. Where do you work? How long have you worked there? Do you have anyone related that's in law enforcement, or is there a state attorney in your family, or a defense attorney in his family? Can you be fair and impartial? All kind of the basic questions, and then the state and the defense kind of come to an agreement on maybe some more intricate, detailed questions that they would throw into a jury questionnaire, and we get those sometimes a week before we're going to pick a jury, which often is a huge advantage, because then we can look at their social media, we can do background checks, we can see who they are, where they socialize, where they go, if they own a business, if their family owns a business. I've gone as far as, if I see that they own, a local coffee shop, I'll drive by the coffee shop, see what type of people go in, see how busy it is or not busy, find out who the landlord is. I mean, sometimes I go down the rabbit hole and I never come out. But in the Karen Reed questionnaire, the one that I thought was interesting, so they go by the basics, right?
This is the prior trial. This is the prior trial.
And they go by the basics about, what's your source of knowledge, which I always ask those questions during voir dire, even if we don't have a questionnaire. But what's your source of knowledge? Television, radio, social media. What's your trust? I always ask, what's your trust in media? 0 to 10. 10 being the highest, 0 being the lowest. What's your trust in media? Like, do you believe what you see? Do you believe what you read? Those type of things, I always ask. That question wasn't in here, which I thought was interesting. And again, this is on the first trial. A lot of questions about DUI, you know, because they thought that, Karen Reed.
They were all drinking, though.
Right. Karen Reed might have been under the influence. Other people were under the influence. So they wanted to know kind of like what your level is in terms of mad or sad. Are you members? Are you interested in it? Do you not drink at all? Are you a teetotaler? I think that's interesting. The one question that I thought was surprising, because we generally, and this is just on the cases that I've handled, we generally don't put in a lot of detail about the case.
You're not going to try your case.
Correct.
You're right.
Nor do I let the state do it. You know, we both kind of put each other in check. But what I thought was interesting was there was one question, again, this is on the first trial. It is alleged on January 29th of 2022, while intoxicated and operating her motor vehicle in Canton, the defendant, Karen Reed, killed her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, on an off-duty Boston police officer. Is there anything about the description of the case, the charges, or the victim was an off-duty police officer that causes you to believe that you cannot be fair and impartial in this case? I think this is really a lump of questions that you could break down.
It's a compounded question.
It's really weird.
Yeah, because there's, what's going to happen is that someone's going to hear that question and they're going to pick one piece of it.
Right, or start Googling away.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's an off-duty police officer,
Yeah.
it's killing a boyfriend,
Yeah.
it's Canton, Mass, it's being intoxicated.
Right.
And I feel you could break this up like, hey, the alleged, the alleged victim in this case was an off-duty police officer. In itself, would that affect your decision that he was an off-duty police officer and he might have been killed outside the line of duty? You know, that's a question. This could be a case where intoxication is an issue. Is there anything about being intoxicated that would affect? You know, I feel like that question is so dangerous, because then it puts into people's minds, wait a minute, did she kill?
I feel like what they're doing, they're already giving you a visual
Correct.
of what happened. They're already giving you a preview of what their case is going to be about.
And I'm wondering if the state put that in and the defense objected and the judge was like, hey, that's a good question. Because I've had that happen to me where I'm like, hey, I don't like this question that they're putting into the juror questionnaire, but we're going to put it in anyways. And that's kind of the give and take with jury questionnaires. But I find them so important, and it really cuts down the amount of bullshit at trial, right? It cuts down the voir dire of the, hey, how long you been working there and stuff like that. You already know the person.
Yeah.
You know what they're about, how many kids they have, and it makes your job easier. Because I already know, Mary has 2 kids. Oh, you have 2 kids. If they get into a fight, do you want to hear both sides of the story? Yeah, I want to hear both sides of the story. Well, you understand in this case, you're only going to hear one side. I don't have to do anything. They have to prove their case. Would that, cause you some trepidation? Yeah. And I really would like to hear from the defense. You're not going to hear from the defense. Those type of questions really are interesting to me. That's why a jury questionnaire is so interesting.
And I like it as my beginning pre-screening. So for me, I like to have somewhat of a baseline of an idea. I don't know if you do this, but I have my juror questionnaires, and I have which ones I want to keep, which ones I want to strike.
All the time.
Already. And it can change.
Right.
Okay? It can change.
Because of body language, because of answering questions. It's just a baseline.
It's just a baseline.
And I do it all the time. I find that helps tremendously, especially in these cases. And there is one last thing I forgot that we didn't talk about. And this is a potential juror and or what a judge would think in the Shannon Sharpe case. And why I find this case so interesting, and I did videos on it because it's really a crazy case. I don't know how much you know about it, but Shannon Sharpe had a relationship with a 20-year-old girl or 23-year-old girl. I'm not sure, she's 20 or 23, a young lady. And she hired Tony Busby, which, if we know who Tony Busby is, he has been suing everyone and anyone for all these things. Jay-Z got sued, his case got dismissed, and I think there's there's cracks in the dam there with Tony Busby where people are starting to see that he's bringing a lot of cases that might not be great cases. He brings this case with this young lady who says that Shannon Sharpe abused her, I think, mentally and talked down to her and, you know, did all these things. I don't think there's quote unquote a large allegation of sexual abuse, but there's certainly an overture of sexual abuse. And Shannon Sharpe, to his credit, has come out and said, hey, listen, I had a relationship with this young lady and it was a consensual relationship, and, you know, it is what it is, and he apologized to the fans and things of that nature. But in his mind, and I think in a lot of people's mind, it was a consensual relationship and not something that was out of the norm in terms of what went on. So he goes to this mediation, they try to settle it. It doesn't settle, and Tony Busby's coming at him very hard. And like we've seen in a lot of these cases, especially the Tony Busby cases, the cracks in the cement start happening, and Shannon Sharpe starts leaking these.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, is that it was going too long, and then what happens is, right, that the information, when you say, get them to talk, the more they're going to hang themselves.
And that's what happens. And Shannon Sharpe starts leaking these texts that he had between him and this young lady. Now, this young lady comes out. We know nothing about her, right? We don't know her background, because don't forget, a lot of these cases, they get sued under Jane Doe, and we don't know who they are. That's a whole nother kind of issue that we could talk about for hours, like whether or not they should reveal the individual who's making these accusations, because it's just so, they're so egregious, some of these accusations, that you really want to look at the person. In this case, we didn't know who she was, and he starts leaking these texts, right? So the texts are like, I can't wait until you choke me, daddy. You know, I don't know, and I don't know if you read these texts.
No, I didn't read them.
Okay, so
I'm hearing this for the first time.
Right, so listen, the other day I was reading these texts, and like, you know, I graduated college in early 90s, and we never had any there's never been a girl who's ever talked like this. You know, these texts that I've seen are crazy, right? So he leaks these texts, and I start thinking to myself, like, this is you know, I always think of a case as a turning point, right? To me, when he leaks these texts, to me, that's a turning point in the case, right? So at first these accusations come out, people are like, oh, I don't know, because everyone kind of likes Shannon Sharpe. He's a good guy, handsome guy, he's funny, he has a good like little podcast going, and people like him. And so the question becomes, does something happen that turns people either not to like Shannon Sharpe or not to like this young lady? So now you have a 20-year-old that sends all these crazy texts. She sends one text, you know, I have a juicy ass. I'm not kidding you. I have a juicy ass. It's $25,000 a cheek. You know, right? That's the face I made. So it's like, now you're picking a jury.
Now, here's the thing, is what I think of.
Tell me.
I think that women are very hard on other women.
Exactly what I think.
And so when automatically they're going to say, well, they're going to think, well, she is just being
the worst.
I'm not going to say the words,
right,
but you know what I mean?
But
so
I think so too. You want other women on your jury.
Women either are going to love you or they are the worst ones with other women.
And I think they will hate her.
Yeah.
And listen, when I was reading these texts, they're so shocking, like just the language that she uses.
Yeah.
That like, and I'm not a teetotaler, you know, I'm not like, you know, going to church every Sunday. But like, I read these texts and I'm just like, there is no way. And he offered her $10 million in mediation. That's exactly what I said, taking it and run. But that's where your lawyer comes in. Your lawyer has to tell you, like, hey, here's the weaknesses in the case. Now, either A, Tony Busby didn't know about these texts.
I think that she needs to have a reality check.
Correct. I think so too. All right, so we had a great time. I had a great time. I love talking about jury selection. I love talking about body language. I love talking about what we look for, not just in juries, right? What we look for in everyday life. We're talking to individuals. We're doing business deals with individuals. We are trusting individuals to come through for us. People are making promises to you. And not everybody has access to someone who can look at the individual, see individual, maybe find out from someone, like, what am I looking for when someone shakes my hand? If they shake it, you know, too lightly, if they shake it, they bring you in close. All those little body cues that would give you some sort of hint on, is this person telling me the truth? Are they being deceptive? And it was a pleasure having someone, and please tell about your book and tell about it. I'd love to hear about it.
Sure. So my book is hopefully coming out by the end of the year, but it's in editing. I ended up getting 6 book deals. I was really happy about that from all the top 5 publishers. So I selected Hachette, and the book is called How to Spot a Liar in 7 Seconds or Less.
It's awesome. That's going to be a great book.
It's the methodology that I've been talking about, the coding system. So it is a true crime book, but it has a strong academic side to it too. So it really kind of fits both modes. The other thing is that I'd like everybody to know is that I think it's important for you as viewers out there too, when you hear people that are analyzing body language, just know that it's not just X plus Y equals Z. And in the minute they do that, you really ought to question it. So it needs to be clustered together.
And also you do coaching.
I do coaching, and
those young lawyers that probably would, and I always say this, the only reason I know what I know is because I've been through a lot of shit. And it's like, so I've been through all this stuff with trials and with individuals that are lying to me that later I find out that are lying to me. Business deals, multi-million-dollar business deals, tens of millions. And I get those, and it's an after the fact thing. Like I think, oh, you know what? When he shook my hand, I should have realized that.
Yeah.
Tell me about your coaching and about, what young lawyers should know.
So, first of all, they should be trained in behavioral analysis and true behavioral analysis. I think that's highly important. If you guys can hone in on that skill, you guys are going to be ahead of the league. I love young attorneys because they're open-minded. They love the AI, they like technology, they're much more forward-thinking, so I really love that. The other thing is that I'd like to share with you is that right now in my work, my primary focus has been, in the past couple of years primarily, is teaching people how to code, certifying them and licensing them so that they can also certify and license others. So we can then change up the bar, so to speak, no pun intended, so that we can bring this behavioral analysis method into the court system, because it's totally objective rather than subjective. So that's a really big quantum leap. And the other thing is that what I really love and what I enjoy doing is teaching about threat analysis. So not only do I teach just about body language, but what are the indicators of a person that might carry out a dangerous intent? Since we're seeing so much happening with school shootings, lone shooters, I am highly trained in what to look for. What are those indicators of a person that might carry out an imminent attack? We can learn a lot about their behavioral signatures, their emotions and cognitions. We can also learn about their dark psychology when you're talking about anger, disgust, and contempt in their language, the militant language.
And what we'll have is her information, so you guys can reach out, send emails, comment, and like and subscribe, of course, the Dirty Gavel, and we will see you next time.